Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel.
You got me on the hook with a promise and a plan. Said, brother, this'll be over before it ever lands. You said it'd come easy, said they'd fall in line. Just a little thunder, then we'd both be fine. I signed on to your story, took my seat in the game. Now every late night audience laughs when they hear my name. Coffee costs more, diesel's climbing still, and everybody's asking who's gonna pay the bill. You said it'd be easy, you said it'd be fast. Just light the fuse and let the trouble pass. Now the prices climb and the people curse. Every speech I give just makes it worse. You shake my hand while you cut my rope. You call me brother while you kill my hope. You can't keep selling sunshine on a bitter pill when the whole damn country's paying the bill. I said you swore it'd be simple. You said don't put that on me. I only said the pretty part you already wanted to believe. But I'm looking for a way out, and you're blocking every road. You keep working every screw loose at the Strait of Hormuz.
Take a couple of questions.
I think when they were dancing, they burst out laughing. Thank God we're muted. Nice work, Joe. A good use of AI.
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so.
All right.
It's not really you, though, Joe.
All right. Welcome to the Shit Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
I'm David Koch.
I'm, as usual, in the bottom left. And by the way, I'm Richard Bussolato.
And we may use a little bit of AI, but we're live every Friday at 3 p.m., where we take the world's carefully assembled collection of crises and ask the important question: has anyone tried turning civilization off and then on again? This week, we've got riots in Paris, warnings of a possible Godzilla El Niño. America apparently still is experimenting with superpower decline. Europe is trying to build a tech industry that doesn't require permission from either Washington or Beijing, and enough climate tipping points to make a game of Jenga look like a robust risk management strategy. Meanwhile, scientists may have delivered one of the biggest cancer breakthroughs in decades. Hunter Biden is handing out sarcastic life lessons on sobriety, and the internet loves it. Russia is discovering that endless wars are, in fact, endless. Somewhere in Australia, Pauline Hanson is being discussed as Prime Minister, proving once again that satire has officially given up and left the building. Joining us today on the show also is a speaker who specializes in helping people navigate the most dangerous territory known to humanity, their own nonsense. Yes. She is an executive coach, a certified speaking professional, a sought-after expert on emotional intelligence and influence, and the author of the new book, Inside: Break Through Your BS to Influence Yourself. But I have to warn you, she's part titanium. Please welcome the titanium hipster herself, Cindy Tian.
Here she is.
Hello, everyone. Loving the introductions for sure. The video and everything that's happened so far.
No bullshit there.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's great to have you, Cindy, and thank you for saying yes. I know sometimes when I ask people, they're like, oh, what can I add to this show? But you can add a lot, because all of this stuff that Joe was just talking about, you know, people are in a pretty vulnerable state, I'd say, around the world right now. So you've written the book, you know, the book that sort of talks about that inner self-management. So before we get stuck into the questions, just do you want to just, without talking about what you're going to talk about relative to the book, including the titanium hitster, do you want to just give us a little bit more of your background?
Sure. So thank you for having me. By the way, I'm really excited to be here. I'm freaked out, but I'm excited all at the same time. So I'm based in sunny Singapore. It's crazy warm in Singapore right now. You just cannot be in a non-air conditioning room. Okay, that's for me. I'm oiling up as I'm talking. So I've been in the industry for the last 13 years, and this industry is the training, speaking, as well as coaching. I also have a podcast called the Own Your BS Show, where I get other accomplished humans to talk about turning their barriers into influence. Okay, so personally, I'm married to a husband who has the unfortunate job of telling me before I spiral into any black holes. I'm also an openly obsessed mama of a dog and a cat. So I've got a dog who is a golden retriever. Her name is Bella. I've also got a Siberian cat. Her name is Libby. They're of the same age. I brought them home at the same time, and they tolerate each other for the last 3 years. I'm a Christian, so my faith runs the engine room of a lot of the things I do.
Yeah, nice. And I've met your beautiful dog. We asked Cindy to bring her golden retriever over after Freddie died, so we could get a little bit of golden retriever love. So I just showed your book inside. Break through your BS to influence yourself. So that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. But your first published it was just a couple of months ago, right?
We had it published in November 2025. Wow, it's been 7-8 months?
Has it been that long? God, okay.
Wow.
So tell us, what sparked the decision to write it? Because it's a real warts and all.
Yeah, sure. Happy to answer that question. And there's so many reasons as to why I wanted to publish a book. And the first answer I would answer that is, the real honest answer was I wanted to build a speaker credibility brand, right? So to say, in order for you to be a credible hired speaker, you need to have some thought leadership. And I'm like, at that time, what thoughts do I have? I've got absolutely no thoughts. The mentor then, his name is Avi, and I was sharing with him about all my life stories. And then he was saying, Cindy, your stories are so transformational. I said, is that so? I never shared with anyone my stories. And I said that, but my stories are not like success stories. They are all failure stories. So I decided I'm going to write a book of all my failures. I thought that was the easiest way to kind of get it going. And at the same time, because I've been doing this work of training and coaching a lot of leaders and sales teams in Singapore. So I realized that they all want one thing, and it's not always the easiest to achieve, which is influence. Yeah, so we all want influence at a larger scale with social media, with the public. We want influence with our teams. We want influence with our family members. But I think a lot of them, they want it, but they don't necessarily have it in the way that they want it. So I realized that a big part of it was not that they don't have the skills, but it's a self problem that they needed to manage. Yeah, so it got me kind of thinking back about the time when I used to be in a sales role and a leadership role as well. It take me back as far as 2010. I was, at that time, the sales director of this company, and I was in Bangkok attending a sales conference. And at that time, this was a job I just taken for 6 months, and it was a job I took purely for the title and the salary. And at the time, I had just left a job I totally hated for another one that I totally hated. So that was what was going on. So I remember sitting in the the hotel room at that time, and just feeling lost, lazy, and so unmotivated. And at the same time was having so much relationship issues. I was dating this guy, and I thought he was going to propose to me, but he decided to dump me. So that was like double whammy. And I just remember looking up at the ceiling and saying this sentence, Cindy, your life is nothing but a load of meaningless crap. Yeah, it was almost like I had lost all influence over myself, much less influence over anyone else. So that sentence kind of became the spine to the book. And, and that's how, it got me started into writing this book. Because and it took me 7 years to write it, just so you know, it took me forever. But I think a big part of me writing the book is me asking myself this big question: why can't I get myself to do what I know I should be doing? Why am I losing control of my life? And, why am I not respected? So it's answering all of those questions.
Wow.
It's managing myself.
Yeah, big, deep questions, right? So, yeah. So I've actually heard your story, but I haven't heard that part of the story. So that was interesting. So BS or bullshit is, I've been in Asia since 2003, and it's not a region where you swear comfortably in public, because people are quite sort of, a bit funny about it. So I'm very cautious. I'm a swearer, but in public situations, I sort of try to sort of tone it down just out of respect for people who don't feel the same way. And Australia is obviously quite different. But even when we called this the shit show, people said to us, "Oh, you shouldn't call it that." And every now and again, someone will say, "I can't go on the show because of the name," which is kind of interesting to me. But but then we've got a president of the United States who uses all sorts of swear words, right? But what does BS mean in your world?
By the way, I really wanted to come on the show because there's the word shit on it. I'm like, okay, this is my kind of show. So we are swearers, but I have to be very careful about that because we're still professionals, right? So I think mind our posture. Okay, so when I say BS, a lot of people will think of it as bullshit. It's meant to be a little bit provocative, but what I realize is that a lot of my failure stories is because of my own BSs. So I kind of broke it down into 3 different types of BS in the book, and I'm abundant of them. Okay, so the first one is blind spots, which is the things we can't see about ourselves, but everyone else can. Yeah, so I've got a ton of blind spots that I had to discover over the years. And, for somebody else, it could be, a leader who thinks that they're being efficient and fast, but the team experiences them as a bad listener, lacking in self-awareness, and, super transactional. So that's blind spots. Yeah, the second one is really about the belief system. So the belief systems, I call it like the shoulds and the must that you've inherited in your life, and you might not even know that it's running you, right? So for example, it's the high performer who's unconsciously addicted to work, and they tell themselves I'm being productive, but underneath it, the narrative is if I'm not productive, I'm not worthy. So they overcommit. Yeah, so they work over the weekends, they chase the next achievements, and then they complain about how busy and tired they are. Yeah, the third BS is, I call it the bull stories, which is the excuses, the justifications, and the uncomfortable lies we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. Yeah, so I used to lie to myself a lot, okay? So maybe for someone else, it's the person who's struggling to cope during the hard times, okay? And maybe they get hooked on something, binge drinking, pornography, numbing out with AI and social media for hours. And the bull story that they might tell themselves is, I'm just relaxing. It's no big deal. Yeah. So different levels of BS. But I think my point to this is that your blind spots will endanger you, because if you cannot see it, you can't change it. Your belief systems will limit you because they kind of put a cap on what you can achieve. And your bull stories will comfortably lie to you all the way to rock bottom. So I believe that self-influence is the brutal honesty to see your BS clearly and the courage to do something about it.
Oh, I love that. That's very, very clear. Guys, got any comments yet?
Well, I'm actually disappointed that S doesn't stand for what I thought it was. This is false advertising. This is.
Sorry to disappoint you, Joe.
I think I don't know. I think bull story is still what you think it means. All right. So I know that you went on quite a journey before you got to this clarity, and it's really, really fantastic clarity. What caused your first downfall?
And because I've got so many downfalls, 10 chapters of downfall inside there, right? So help yourselves to it. Okay, but I think One of the more significant ones was during my very first full-time job. I joined the airline at the age of 19 years old. I was young and so innocent then, and I really, really wanted this job because of my BS belief system. I never felt that I could do anything else, to be honest. That was the only thing I wanted. The only ambition I have. People want to be doctors, lawyers, and astronauts. I just want to be a flight attendant. Only thing I wanted. So I joined the airline believing that, I have achieved my dreams. I'm going to travel to Paris, London, and New York and just kind of living the life I've always dreamed of. Because I kind of came from a family which is, we were not dirt poor, but we were kind of like always in lack, right? There was always not enough and you can't buy extra things. So this is the first time I'm going to be making good money on my own. So I was really excited about the job. We went through 4 months training. After the 4 months training, I did my very first flight, and it was a flight to Osaka in Japan. And I was so ready. I thought people are going to love me, right? But unfortunately, people did not even minutely like me. So I got bullied real bad. And it was bullying for little things like, how come you're not smiling so much? How come you're not initiating a conversation with us? Why are you not offering the seniors a drink? Yeah, so I got bullied really badly, and it really affected my self-esteem because I thought that was the only thing I can do, right? Total self-belief about that. And because of survival reasons, I had to force myself to change from somebody who honestly didn't care about smiling or being nice to somebody who is extremely people-pleasing. Interestingly, when I did that, I got rewarded. So what it means is that people started to like me. I got better work positions. I stopped getting bullied a lot more. And then suddenly I realized, oh my God, this is my new belief system. If I were to please people, I'm going to get my way. Yeah, so it kind of started there. But the horrible thing was that I felt misaligned inside. So as much as I was smiling like a sunflower on the outside, inside me, I felt so sick of myself because I felt that I was performing and putting on an act all the time. And it became so exhausting. And every time I went back to the hotel room after a flight, all I really wanted to do was to throw my uniform aside and light up a cigarette and drink a beer. And that was literally what I did after every flight. So that was kind of like the beginning of me descending down into this black hole and just almost at some point didn't even recognize myself. So, if you don't recognize yourself in your own reflection, it's time to recalibrate, except that I did not do that because I was young, innocent, and not so smart then.
Oh, I didn't realize it started there because there was also some school bullying as well, right?
Yeah. The school bullying was, there's a whole lot of that, right? The school bullying was very much about me bullying others.
Wow.
It was, and there's a whole other story altogether because I came from a background where in Asia, and this is common, where in those days boys are favored more than the girls. So I was brought up in a family of 20. My grandmother was like Empress Dowager. She loves the boys more than the girls, and she would say quite mean things to me that this is not about blame, this is just processing, and I think a big part of me felt that I was never enough and not really wanted. So then when I went to school, I really wanted, because at home I was invisible, so in school I wanted to be super visible. So because of that, I just became a total badass. Got myself into gangs and I started bullying people first. I would actually confront girls, pull them to the toilet and just beat the crap out of them just for my own satisfaction, which is horrible, right? But I think it really came from a place of I didn't feel enough. So I had to do this to make myself feel important and powerful. Yeah. Because again, when I did that, people were like cheering me on. You go, girl, you are the leader here. So I'm like, oh, why not? Let's do that.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. Every bully I've ever met, just a second, I'll give you a break. Every bully I've ever met is hurting very, very much so inside. Okay, so this is where we're going to get a little bit more serious about where this all led to. because you've sort of underplayed the what caused this so far. You go by the name titanium hipster. I've only got titanium in my mouth. So what's the story there? Because that's when I first heard it. And by the way, Cindy's the sweetest person in the world. I can't even imagine her being a bully. But when I heard this story, I was quite gobsmacked. So.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I don't even believe that I've gone through this. Okay. So, earlier I was talking about, being in the airline, and I was struggling with all that self-esteem issues and being bullied and the misalignment and all that, undercurrent that has been accumulated. And because I couldn't manage myself, I started drinking a lot. And initially it started with just one beer to relax. And I thought it was no deal, right? What is one beer? Come on. Yeah. So from one beer, it became 3 beers. From 3 beers, it became a bottle of wine. From a bottle of wine to a bottle of wine every night. From a bottle of wine. And at that time, because I was struggling with all the horrible emotions, I was also struggling with insomnia. So from the bottle of wine, it became a bottle of whiskey. And then after that, even the bottle of whiskey could not get me to sleep. I just could not get my brain to shut down. So I started mixing whiskey with sleeping pills. After that, the pills started to increase as well. So my personal record was drinking half a bottle of whiskey and downing 8 sleeping pills. And I blacked out for 24 hours in Copenhagen. So that was the kind of like and I just woke up feeling, it was almost like I woke up not knowing where I am, but subconsciously I knew that I had to put on my makeup, go shower and go for flight. And I could still do that. It was so weird. In the middle of the flight, I suddenly sobered up and I wondered, what have I done the last few hours? So that was so dangerous. So anyway, that went on for a few years until I started feeling pain in my legs. And that time, because I was exercising a lot as well, because I was also struggling with wanting to be skinny. So as you can see, a lot of BS that I was struggling with. So I thought that, because I was running a lot and I thought that it was just rheumatism issues or nerve issues, I started going to see doctors and traditional Chinese medication. Nothing helped. And the pain became on both legs and shooting pains in the middle of the night. Eventually, I was referred to an orthopedic specialist who took, scans of me and my legs. And I was sitting in the hospital with my mom, trying to get a diagnosis of what's happening. And the doctor told me, Cindy, you've been diagnosed with this condition called avascular necrosis. And what it is, it's really a degeneration of my hip joints. So what he said was that both of my hip joints have totally degenerated to that of a 90-year-old woman. And I was 25 years old at that time. So it's crazy, right? So I looked at the doctor, disbelief. My mom was there with me. I held her hand. I started crying. My mom asked the doctor, how did this happen to my girl? We don't have family history of this. So he started sort of investigating a lot more. And he came to the conclusion it was due to alcoholism, chronic alcoholism. So there was a loss of blood flow to my hip joints, which caused it to degenerate. And he told me that I would likely have to be living in wheelchair for the rest of my life. So in the end, we found another doctor, another orthopedic specialist. And thank God we found that person. He eventually told me that, the best thing I can do for you is to cut off your diseased hip joints and put titanium implants inside. So since I'm my 20s until now, I'm in my 40s, I've been living with titanium hip implants in my legs. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy. When I travel, I have to carry a cart with me.
Yeah.
And I'm not supposed to run for the rest of my life. So that's kind of where I am. So that's how the titanium hipster came about.
Yeah, right. It's just how quickly it all happened, right? Because you were still quite young, and I could imagine it must have been truly frightening. But yeah, that massive consequence and also chronic alcoholism at such an age, right? But were you working with Singapore Airlines?
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was.
So you're a Singapore girl where you had to be skinny as well. So there was a lot of pressure. There's, on that, right? So, like, God, listening to all of this, there's so much to what you've just been telling us, and it's heartbreaking and empowering at the same time, because I think there's a young girl out there who's going through exactly what you went through, and could potentially listen to you and maybe get beyond this faster. But how do we break through our BS? What are your key learnings from a life hard lived?
Yeah, a big part of breaking through your BS is to number one, examine your BS. I think a lot of us, we don't even know what they are, right? So I call BS is like your invisible barriers that you can't see, you won't question, and you refuse to challenge. So it's kind of invisible to many people until you start to examine it. And I tend to use the analogy of, me waking up in the middle of the night, and I'm somebody I'm a little bit of a night owl. So I wake up in the middle of the night to get a drink from my kitchen all the time. So there was one night I went to the kitchen, going to get a cup of water. I opened the cabinet to get the cup, and there was this just massive giant cockroach there, feasting on my potatoes. And I chose to ignore that the cockroach was there because I was so afraid of it. I didn't want to deal with the mess. So I closed the cabinet and decided I'll go back to sleep and pretend that nothing has happened. 3 days later, I forgot all about it. I went back to, again, get myself a drink, opened the cabinet, and there it was. Now, instead of one cockroach, it's become 4 cockroaches. So the analogy is this, what you leave in the dark, it doesn't disappear, it multiplies. Yeah, so a big part of it, if you think about the cockroach analogy, is to call it out, right? I think what I'm saying is that people are not even acknowledging their BSs in the first place. They go straight to, what can I do? But let's call it out. What does it mean? It's a moment of radical honesty, to even just say things like, I keep over-committing to tasks because I'm scared of being as unimportant. Be honest with yourself. Yeah, I get defensive with feedback because I tie criticism to my worth. And, I can't do sales because I crumble, when people reject me. Yeah, so that's calling it out, being radically honest with yourself. The second part is really clean it up. So own the mess it's made. Let go of the shame. Take responsibility and make internal amends. Apologize if your BS has hurt somebody or hurt yourself. Forgive yourself for not honoring promises. Let go of the stories that no longer serve you. And then the last one is really about correcting it. And this is about redesigning new mindsets, narratives, and behaviors. This is about reframing your thoughts. This is about practicing new behaviors. A lot of the time, people go straight into, what can I do? But I think the deeper work of calling it out and cleaning it up, it's not there yet. Yeah. So I truly believe that self-influence really starts with, seeing your BS clearly, not to shame it, but to put a spotlight on it and to strip it of its power. And that's why I try to be, as radically honest as I can, because I'm really okay talking about all of this now. It doesn't hurt me or bother me a whole lot anymore. It's just something that's happened. It's of the past. I've dealt with it, and I'm really trying my best to just own up to it.
If you so for me, when you, especially, what was your second one? It was
Clean it up.
No, the BSs. There were 3 BSs. The second one was
belief systems.
Belief systems, right? So for me, unraveling my belief system happened when I spent a lot of time traveling around the world by myself, when I didn't have everybody else's noise in my ear telling me who I was and what I should think and how I should behave and all. So that's how I kind of cleared out the system. Have you got any ideas, seeing your BS in the first place? I think possibly the hardest thing for anyone to do, because it's comfortable, even if it's uncomfortable, it's still comfortable. How do you, what's that first step?
That's a great question. If you're somebody who does a lot of personal development work, that means you read a lot, you engage coaches to work with you, you're reflective. Usually these BSs will come up quite a bit because you're doing the work on yourself. But if a person is somebody that, and I think these days a lot of people do personal development, by the way, but if you're somebody who jumps from one meeting to another, you jump from one job to another, you never ever stop to reflect, to think, you never ever get feedback from everybody, it's very easy to be hidden in your BSs. Because, even for me, all the while I thought I was okay. Until a time such as all my BSs were sort of catching up. catching up with me. One of the tools that I use with my clients is, we use Enneagram as a framework to get them to think about, how their BS might be surfacing in ways that they don't know. And the clients that I've coached who has used the Enneagram has found it to be super powerful. So that's one way of doing it. Using a psychological assessment, working with a coach, reflections. And typically people who want to discover their BSs have also got significant emotional experiences that have happened to them to make them want to uncover these in the first place. Yeah. So, and one example, I was working with a coach at one time, and I was struggling a lot with my marriage at that time, mainly about the problem of, and I'm just going to be really honest with this. I didn't feel like my husband was taking up the role as the man of the household. So I was worried. I was working really hard until one of my friends, who is a marriage mentor, and because she's so good at this and she knows me so well, she asked me this question. And the question was, Cindy, what are you truly afraid of? And I remember stopping to think for a while, and I realized I was just really afraid of working in McDonald's when I'm 72 years old.
Yeah.
I was just so worried we didn't have enough money for retirement, and I have to work really hard. And that was really the fear driving the anger and the fights and the quarrels, right? But I wouldn't have known it if nobody asked me that huge question. So I think getting coaching, getting mentors, reading, hopefully that comes up.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, the idea of the working in McDonald's and when you're 72, it's a very cultural thing here in Singapore. There's a lot of elderly people working in McDonald's across the island. It's had a lot of media coverage and the question and cleaning up in the hawker centres and stuff. So it's created a lot of conversation about elderly people still needing to work to survive. So it's a very local example that I can relate to. I just want to make sure everybody else does. But for the three guys, what's your BS that you have either faced or are too scared to face? Anyone got theirs? Joe, do you want to? Hey, Joe, come on, you've got some.
Well, I was just going to put a marker on the timestamp when you were talking about me not stepping up, being the man. Oh, sorry, you're talking about the husband. Sorry. And I'm actually quite comfortable with asking if someone wants fries with that. I think my BS or the difficulty that I have is trying to figure out. I spend so much time on being smart and smarter than everybody else. I really have great difficulty finding people who truly are smarter than me. So that's, and it may be BS, it may not be BS, because I was actually struck with the idea about how, as you're speaking, this is the way my mind works, right? Most people will tune in and listen. My brain goes in the totally opposite direction. And I think about how BS helps us, as in, I think well-executed BS, some presidents not included, can really do something. I mean, if you think about how we got out of the first depression, the 1930s, right? That was BS. That was absolute BS. It was manicuring of the news. It was making sure that it was all good news, and it was a bold-faced lie about how things were going, but it worked. I was just at the talk recently, and I apologize for not having the full name, but essentially the talk was about beliefs. The author's first name is Niño. Go for the rest of it, and it really was about, again, beliefs. And one of the great stories that I got from that one was when Serena Williams was having trouble with her game. She wasn't approaching the net enough, and her coach said, "Listen, you're not going up to the net." But she said, when I do that, I don't seem to do well. And then he said, "No, listen, look, statistically speaking, when you approach the net, 80% of the time you actually are more successful." And so she began to attack the net, and she began to turn around her game, and she did extremely well. The only thing is, 80% was bullshit. It was just totally made up. The coach had very strategically created something which they hung on to. So I understand, and I do believe very much in this, because I study hypnosis. I'm actually in the middle of a of a course right now. So if you're feeling very sleepy right now, it's not because I'm boring. It's because I'm leading you down a path. The power of belief is so amazing. As in, like, if you can absolutely create the sense of belief around you, and when you're talking about the need for reflection, I think when things aren't going right, when there is something wrong about things, and enough is going wrong, then you kind of go like, okay, maybe we need to adjust the BS. Because if you think about, for me, the thought really right now is about the world as it stands, where America is right now. America used to run on a much better story. And along the way, they lost it, and they're not holding on to that story anymore. But if you are, able to step back and say, let's think about this. The original story, the idea of America is BS anyway. It's such an amazing thing, right? The start of America. And then you think about what happened after the Second World War. That is totally against the usual game. As in, like, the way civilization has been running itself in the past was the victor always takes everything. The losers, they get to suffer and die. And what America chose to do at that time was to do a different thing. And it changed the way the world worked. Unfortunately, now we're not in that same game anymore. So anyway, my thoughts about BS, and with apologies to anybody who may be offended by ideas that working in a McDonald's may not be a good thing. I don't know. One of the great things about the way this brain works in here is when I'm talking to somebody who works at McDonald's, I keep thinking to them, say, how can you make yourself a marketing asset?
A marketing asset?
Yeah.
I'm always trying to. My daughter was spending some time in a restaurant. It was a job she really didn't enjoy very much. But I said, listen, why don't you do this? Why don't you try and figure out how you can actually upsell someone, offer them a coffee, offer them a dessert afterwards, and then become a valuable, employee. But it's just the way I like to look at things. It's never the mainstream. And as I have mentioned many times on this show, my wife is not fond of me going off on these flights of fancy of different thoughts and considering the other side. So we just had one of those blowouts a while ago. So this is all quite fresh.
So it's interesting, Joe, because what you've just been saying is your BS comes from a place of confidence, whereas what Cindy was sharing was a place of having not having any value in yourself.
No,
so they're kind of the opposite, right, David?
I think that's not the difference that I hear. I think the difference, one is internal, one's external.
Okay.
You take the Great Depression story, it's an external BS to motivate. You take the Serena Williams story, it's an external BS. But the BS we tell ourselves are internal. And they are ways for us not to need to come out of the comfort zones that we've created for ourselves. The zones where we do not need to genuinely sort of do what the BS that Joe talks about is actually asking us to do, which is to challenge ourselves. And that's what Cindy is really talking about in that way, that those belief systems prevent us from actually challenging ourselves and realizing what we actually are. Whereas what Joe's talking about are very different. And they tend to be external. There's a coach, there's a mentor, there's someone else who is able to do that. And the techniques they may do is those things. Even hypnosis, self-hypnosis is an incredibly difficult thing in that way, except for rationalization as a form of self-hypnosis. And that rationalization is very much in that line of what Cindy talks about. In that way, so I think there's actually a big difference between the two, and the connection is that power of that belief, that sort of mental placebo, in some sense, as Joe's described, is extremely strong. And when you use it on yourself, it is that half-bottle whiskey and the sleeping pills. It is extremely strong. And it's so strong, you really don't see it. And you end up going through a long period of life following through. And I think culturally we are that as well, which is the comment on America in that way, as you know, we end up kind of caught within that, and that's kind of, you know, the whole poly crisis in many respects is because we are caught within our own BS in that way. We are caught within the belief systems that actually has us thinking things have to be this way, or things are better this way, or things need to be this way, or the moral responsibility is this way, or whatever it is that we want to say. So I think there's a big distinction between the two, as in who is using the BS in what way, but the power of it is the same.
Yeah, Cindy, do you want to comment on what everyone's been saying?
Yes, I think this is really interesting and complex at the same time, right? So there's the internal, the external, and I think what I'm saying is that the main thing here is to examine it and to look at it clearly and to ask yourself, is this BS helping you or not? Who is the person is turning you to be? Is that the outcome that you want for yourself? Yeah, so for me, if I were to share my story, mine was, you know, I kind of reached a point in my life whereby, oh gosh, I'm totally in the place whereby it almost came to a point whereby I was self-loathing. I was despising myself, I was disrespecting myself, and I just couldn't live with all of that anymore. So, but if your BS is working for you, it's taken you to a great place, you've achieved more, you're happy with who you are, then, you know, your BS is working well for you, right? So I once had a quote by somebody, I think it was Tom Bilyeu, is another influencer, and he once said this, which was really interesting because it was really true for me. He said something like, at the end of the day, how happy you are is determined about how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself, when you're all alone. How happy are you with yourself? And I don't mean happy with the achievements, happy with who you are generally, how you're progressing, who you are as a person. You're not hating yourself. You're generally respecting yourself. You know, you have peace of mind. You're moving towards what's meaningful for you. I think reflections like this has been helpful for me because, you know, what I try and do is to recalibrate on a weekly basis because we're doing so much, right? And then sometimes we forget where the wind is taking us, where our BSs are taking us. And the recalibration on a weekly basis for me has been very powerful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Nice. I've just known so many people trying to go through the journey that you're explaining, and they struggle with where to start, what to do first. It's so overwhelming to begin with that they don't do anything, or they get on the journey and then they get overwhelmed and then they step off. You know, so it's what you're talking about is actually the hardest thing a person can ever do. It's pull all the stuff that's inside out and have a look at it and say, do I want it? Do I chuck it out? Right. So when it comes to this, what do you think is the most underrated skill in managing yourself, and how can we all practice it?
You know, if I were to think back again about my own experience and you know, my own example, it would be insight about your own emotional patterns. And we all know emotional intelligence is knowing your emotions, but do we really know, right? So I think the idea of there was a research done by Tasha Eurich, she's an organizational psychologist, and you know, this is a big part about self-awareness, self-insight, that you know 90 to 95% of the people generally think that they are self-aware, but her research after interviewing 5,000 people came to the conclusion that only 10 to 15% of people are truly self-aware. Yeah. So
may I just say, duh?
Exactly.
So knowing who you are, how you perceive the world, knowing your thought patterns, your emotional patterns, your habitual patterns. Okay, we kind of know who we are, but do we really know the pattern that's running us? So I think one part of it, if I can just specify, would be to be able to read your emotions well, because the general public, if you ask them how they feel, they'll probably give you 3 words: I'm frustrated, I'm exhausted, I'm stressed up. But is it just that? So I use this acronym called READ, READ. So the first thing is to recognize it. Yeah. So asking yourself, what's your emotional vocabulary like? You know, a lot of us are financially literate, but emotionally illiterate. Yeah. Understanding how you're feeling on a regular basis. We think this is simple, but it might not be simple. the example I'm sharing is, I never knew I was feeling all those feelings. I only knew there was something uncomfortable about me. And I just tried to numb it away with partying, with alcohol, and with going to sleep, right? But it was only on hindsight that I realized that the environment I was in, the way I was thinking, the person I was dating was all not great for me. Not that they're bad on their own, but they're all not great for me because they were stirring up all these things, okay? And that's something that nobody can do this hard work for you, that self-insight work. Yeah, reading your emotion. Number 2 is examining the cause. So we always say that emotions are signals to emotional needs. And I usually, we want to say something, we're all adults here, so there's nothing really to hide. There are times whereby, we're upset. Why is it that I'm just going to say this, okay? Why is it that sometimes in a marriage, one person cheats? Is it because maybe the husband needs respect, and then the wife is a very strong woman. The wife keeps going on and on. The husband doesn't feel respected, and then they go out and find somebody that can give them that respect. So emotions are a signal to a deeper emotional need. I've also heard a quote. I think it's from Dr. Gabriel Mate, because he goes around and he talks to drug addicts, right? And he says that a big part of addictions are stemmed from emotional needs that are not being met. Yeah, so it's not just about the feeling, but it's to examine the cause of, where is it kind of coming from? Okay, you're yelling at your colleague, or you're snapping at your spouse now, but there's a deeper underlying current to that. And then A would be to assess the intensity on the scale of 1 to 10. How serious is it? Yeah, for some people, it could be just snapping. I'm irritated, no big deal. But if it's if the intensity is serious, like you realize that your body is breaking out in hives, you're suddenly having severe insomnia. Yeah, then you kind of know, okay, there's something right here. It's chronic. I cannot not do anything about it. Let me not fudge it. Let me not cover it up. I really have to assess it, because this is something that, I have to deal with. Yeah, and there's a bigger underlying cause to it. And then D would be, direct your efforts. What do you need to do at this point? It could be as simple as I need to talk to somebody. I need to go and see a therapist. Yeah, I need to slow down and maybe take a sabbatical, right? So burnout is really a big part of burnout, and people being exhausted is not having enough balance in their life. So very often, again, we go straight to the what are you going to do, when we have not uncovered what could be underlying, causes of all these emotions. So I would say emotional insight for sure. I think not everybody is emotionally very literate yet. And, what I do with my coaching clients is I get them to collect data about themselves. So for 30 days, they have to put in an Excel spreadsheet. What are the dominant emotions you feel? At the end of 30 days, you now have data. What does this tell you about yourself?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Have you ever come across Neil Donald Walsh? He wrote. He did the Conversations with God. Who's read them? The Catholics might be. I'll never read that nonsense. But he said something. He said something that I really took to heart. He said, when you express anger, it's not about the person you're expressing anger towards. It's about something that the anger's within yourself. And I remember just listening. It was one of those phrases. I just really, really took it on board. And then the next time I was with the boys, and they were small and annoying, and I wanted to be doing other things. I'm not a children's entertainer. I was never that mother, right?
You don't twist balloons?
No, definitely not. And I'd be like, the boys, and I said, wait a minute, am I angry with the boys, or am I angry with myself? And I realized I was frustrated in the situation I was in, and I was projecting that onto the boys, blaming them, but it was my own frustration. So I think that real self-awareness of your own emotions and when they come out and why they come out, and if it's directed towards someone else, is it really about them or is it about you?
You should really try the balloons.
Yeah, no, because they're really bad for the environment, Joe. All right. So I'm just looking at the time. What are the tangible things people can do right now to manage themselves, especially in the current climate? Because this is a very, very intense time for humanity, and there's a lot of people escaping into addiction, consciously and unconsciously. So, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so tangible things, and I'm a framework person, right? I think in frameworks, what can people do right now? I think the first thing is to understand, how stress, what is your tolerance level like to stress and uncomfortable emotions? I'm gonna be the first one to put up my hands and say that I'm high in anxiety, and I'm naturally wired that way. So I'm not gonna behave like a person who's really calm. So I'll be mindful of that default version of myself, right? And what are the stress symptoms that are showing up? So if we kind of break it up into like the 4 domains, and I call it the 4 burners, would be the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. So symptoms. Yeah. So what are physical symptoms like? What's sort of showing up in your body? Backaches, insomnia, maybe you're breaking out into rashes. You're suddenly putting on a lot of weight, or you're aging suddenly. So this physical symptoms. Yeah. Emotional symptoms is when you start to feel suddenly emotionally disconnected. You start to feel lonely. You start to feel like, hey, there's nobody in this world that I can connect with. There's emotional symptoms, and you suddenly go into like a depressive moods. And then mental symptoms would be brain fog. You feel like you cannot make the right decisions. There are 20 things pulling you apart at one time. You cannot make clear decisions on how to move forward. And then the S would be the spiritual symptoms. Spiritual symptoms usually come in the form of feeling that your life is empty. Like, what's the purpose of this? What's the meaning of this? Yeah, what am I doing all of this for? One day I'm just going to die, right? Why do we bother? Yeah, so understand your symptoms. And then from there, so let's say you feel that maybe your symptom is really strong in the spiritual part. Yeah, I'm feeling empty all the time. I don't know what's the purpose of my life. Yeah, the world is just going to die with all these wars coming across. And then you want to ask yourself, what can I then do in that domain to balance up? So spiritual things we can do would be things like, connecting with something bigger than yourself. So for me, it's religion. For you, it doesn't have to be religion. It could be going to a walk in the nature. Yeah, connecting with something bigger and more powerful than yourself. It could be things like building my purpose, go and volunteer somewhere, changes the entire perspective. Yeah, physical symptoms, physical things you can do, running, yeah, massage, eating better. Nobody wants to eat a salad when they're feeling stressed out. We all want to go and eat like a bucket of fried chicken. Yeah.
With the right amount of bacon.
So we always say that what you need to do, you think about how you feel after you do it, not when you're doing it. So it might a pound of bacon, 2 strips might feel really good, but a pound of it might not be super helpful. Yeah. So then emotional symptoms. I mean, for me personally, animals has been a big part of regulating my own emotions. Yeah, and I realized that I cannot do without animals right now. So they've emotionally regulated me a lot. It's just kind of thing with things that speaks to your heart. Music could be one, and then mental things you can do. A big part of mental is really getting clarity, right? So taking out a journal to write down what are your top 10 values. Yeah. Clarifying what are your thoughts, what's messy about it. Yeah. So this is how it's a tangible thing. So thinking about it with the 4 domains is has been quite helpful. Understanding your stress tolerance, what are your symptoms, and then going into the activity that helps to balance up those symptoms. So it's a big part of recognizing your signals before they start to spiral.
Yeah, we've just got Nico here, who's valuing what you're sharing. It is Nico, right? I can't really see the picture, but he said he knows he's got all the tools. He's been on the show before and foundation to be successful. He's an incredible guy, but something keeps holding him back. Have you got any thoughts? Any tips for him? I know you don't know him.
Yeah, I don't know him, and I don't know what he means by something keeps holding him back. If you have not had a conversation with a coach, a therapist, start there. And again, because human beings, our brains, other than Joe Augustine, most of us, our brains are not so powerful, so a little bit more one-dimensional.
Sorry, which Joe Augustine are you speaking about here?
The one with the voice of the Wizard of Oz.
The one that drives his wife crazy, right?
Seek wise counsel. Seek wise counsel. Think of the people that you have in your life, and not all of us have great friends that could give us some wisdom. So if you don't have, I'm fortunate to have a lot of great friends that bring a lot of wisdom to me. Not a lot of us have. And if you don't have it, pay for it. The money is not wasted. Not wasted. Yeah. Get a different perspective. Get a coach. Get a mentor. You can do the Enneagram test if you want to, but that's not the be all and all, because even with the Enneagram test or whatever personality test, sometimes we lie to ourselves because we want to be this and we don't want to be that. And that adds up another bull story there. But definitely talk to somebody who can give you some wisdom. Yeah. And it's not just keeping and thinking about it, but it's you expressing it. And a big part of emotional leadership is emotional expression. When you can express yourself, you process it. And with AI these days, it's easier, right? You can process it. You talk to yourself and talk to somebody and see what comes up. It's never a one-step process. It has taken me a decade. So if you're hoping to get rid of all the negative BS within one day, not possible. It's an entire journey. And the best time to start is 20 years ago.
I'd like to add a little bit to the thing about why it's hard to start, especially when you think that you need to do something. It's self-preservation. We're human beings, and our egos, as much as we talk about egos as usually a negative thing, the ego is the self, right? So we are actually protecting ourselves. So we don't want to willingly kill ourselves. But that's what a radical change is, because you the person you've been for the last 50 years, 57 in my case, if you're going to go through something that's going to radically change you, like, for instance, if I were to start smiling all the time, it
would be weird.
It would be weird, and it would, in a sense, kill the old Joe Augustine. That part of it is we are self-preserving in that sense. We're very comfortable with who we are, despite all the circumstances. So we can sit in a pile of BS in a really sad state, and recognize that in order for all this to go away, we have to change. So I spent many years recognizing that what was holding me back, probably the most, was the fact that I was on radio, right? Because I was on radio, I was enjoying it. But if you talk about what was holding me back from greatness in terms of being bigger than myself and doing more, probably that whole thing, being addicted to it and kind of liking the whole thing, the way work went and all that. But it was the thing that was holding me back. And I actually, in a sense, getting fired was the best thing that could ever happen to me. But we are protective of ourselves. So the idea of just saying, okay, you know what, we need to change, I'm going to do something about it. You are actually stepping into the abattoir of your life and going, I'm going to become bacon. I shall become bacon.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine was stuck with a story of misery that was the foundation of her life, and there was never going to be any resolution to the story. And I said to her, it's time to let that story go, but she couldn't, because it was the foundation of her entire existence. So what you're saying, Joe, is really, it obviously manifests in many, many, many different ways, but I think it's...
You can say profound. You can say profound.
Yeah. No, I'm not giving you that. Anyway,
no chance.
We're coming up to the hour. So, Cindy, we're in a world in a state of crisis, and my greatest fear is that the vast majority of the human population move into despair based on how bad things are getting. So what's your sort of takeaway message for everyone listening today about, because self-management is probably going to be one of the most important things we all learn in the coming years. What's your final message to everyone to help them on that journey?
Yeah. If you're truly struggling and you're stuck, so I mean, if you're really, really happy in your life, with your life, and no BS, nothing's bothering you, of course, go with the flow and do whatever you need to do. But if you're somebody who's feeling stuck, you're not happy with yourself, you kind of know that something needs to change, you're not living your life to your full potential, or you're really, really troubled about what's really happening in the world. I started this conversation by saying that I had lost all influence over myself in that Bangkok hotel room, right? And in hindsight, I think the turning point wasn't really like a strategy or framework or big enlightenment on the outside. It was a decision to stop looking away and start looking inside. So pay attention to what's happening within, because your symptoms, whatever symptoms you're experiencing, will first whisper before they shout. So I usually like to leave my listeners with one thing. Imagine that you're now 85 years old. It doesn't look like any of us are 85 yet.
Oh, I'm
And
there.
now, but imagine
I'm
you're
there.
85, okay? You're looking back on your life. Yeah, who is the person you would have wanted to be? Yeah, so you're going to ask yourself that hindsight question. And just as important, who is the person you would not have wanted to become? Yeah, so get crystal clear on both, okay? Because as we're keeping up with the war, the crisis, and everything on the outside, let's not forget about what's happening on the inside. Yeah, so honesty without compassion is really self-punishment, and compassion without honesty is self-denial, okay? So remember that, and the first and most powerful person that you'll ever influence really starts with yourself.
Yeah. Nice one. Now, I'll bring us all back up. I forgot to ask you if you wanted to stay or if you want to escape the news bit. Most people do, so it's totally up to you. But I'm
going to escape it, but thank you for having me. I'm just going to listen to the YouTube live for now so that I can do some of the other work that I have lined up for the rest of the day.
Oh, I thought we could speak behind your back. Okay, all right.
Please don't. I'm going to record it.
Never would. No, thank you, darling. We really appreciate it. I love your honesty. I love your stories, and I love the work that you're doing. So thank you for agreeing to share it with us.
Thank you very much,
Andrea, for having me on the Shit Show. I'm so proud to be here, and thank you, Joe, David, as well as Richard, for being here together with me today.
All right.
Yeah. Have a lovely conversation, everyone.
All right.
It's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
OBS.
All right.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about the external that Joe was talking about when you were talking about Serena Williams and all that sort of stuff. But I was actually talking about you and the way you sort of exist in the world versus the examples that you shared versus what Cindy was saying about the lack of self-worth. Because you don't lack self-worth, right, Joe?
I have views about that. Anyway, so I would say that when I think about it, I realize that my mom made me feel much better than I deserve to be. She installed a sense of confidence and self-worth. So the shorter answer would have been, no, I don't lack it. But it is thanks to my mom. I think she was the one who reassured me about my thoughts and my thinking. She realigned me when I was off. I'm a bit included physical punishment, which resulted in what I have today, which may not be the catch of the week, but it is what it is.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts before we get stuck into the news? We're going to rip through it today.
A lot there.
There's a lot there, and actually, what struck me the most, what she describes, is actually almost like the professional process you're trying to go through in your work if you manage money, which is what I've done, virtually all my working life. Is you examine where you did well and where you did not do well, and you work on those parts to ensure that the bad things don't happen again, and you're trying to emphasize the good parts. And the most important part of that whole process is the honesty with yourself, and not in some way or form blaming others. There was a raccoon crossing the road, right? That's why I lost money this week. And it really is a very, very hard process, because at the end of the day, people still want to effectively lie to themselves about the things you did badly, because it hurts to admit it. But it's actually something that does improve your performance over time if you are honest about these things and evaluate them correctly. And hopefully you can include people that enable you to do that as well on that road.
I think it's equally dangerous the opposite. The things that you do well, you lie to yourself about as well. It wasn't the raccoon, it was me. Maybe work or whatever it is, right? It's because when things work, especially if you're trading or whatever it is, you make a bunch of money.
Yeah,
is you really believe in yourself. You think,
of course,
hey, I'm so brilliant. That system was obviously right.
But I kind of think of the people that you guys must have worked with across your life. I don't think that self-awareness and emotional intelligence would have been at the top of the pops, right? As a general rule.
No. I mean, there's there's this part. I think this is really interesting because I'm just looking back at Nico's comment in that way, about wanting to be successful and something keeps holding back. It's back to this comment about you, as a person, kind of as that, because that success is defined in some context, and that emotional awareness in a way is sort of what that is, right? So you have this thing of saying, what actually does it mean to be successful? You're incredibly successful. You may be incredibly successful, but you don't see it because you see it in the next context. You've done a lot, you've gotten here, so you're always kind of moving it to the next context. So in that way, you never be successful because you never actually accept that actually you've made it, you've done a lot. And that goes in some sense into the question of people we work to in that way, is when you are sort of like making money in that sense, and all these things going on in the world and stuff, is you in some sense make yourself contactless. Because contextless. Because if you actually are too concerned with the context, you're not really just seeing what it is and so on. You get married to a story or whatever it is. And you don't want to do that. So in some sense, you're in a business where you strip away that kind of personal associations in some sense, and it goes on past. And I've seen it. It goes into your personal relations, goes into your relationship with your wife, it goes into your relationship with your children in those ways, because you begin to see them as a trade in that way, because that's what you do all day. That's kind of innately how you see everything.
Yeah. All right. Let me
my stop loss on that one.
Let's move to the news. Shall we do that?
We should
do it.
There's a lot to go through.
There
This
is.
is what people pay for, right?
We're getting so much money, it's ridiculous, Joe. Okay. Hunter Biden is on social media, and he looks like he's having a bit of fun. So Jill Biden published her book, and Jake Tapper's sort of going in all sorts of directions around the book. But the really interesting thing is he put up a post the other day saying, "I'm 7 years sober." And most people were like, hurrah, good on you. And then someone wrote, bullshit, that was your bag of Coke in the White House. To which he replied, it most definitely was not. I would never have forgotten my drugs. But there's a lot of other things that he's doing. So one of the things he's really starting to highlight now, he's like, you guys keep going after me. You're going after my mum. But Jared and Ivanka with their island in Albania, which is creating massive protests. Eric's got some drone company that's going IPO or worth 1.5 billion that's just won some massive contract. Don Jr., all that sort of stuff. And nobody's really talking about that, right? But they're talking about this. So anyway, he's worth keeping an eye on. For the football fans here, why do those riots happen? Can anyone help me understand? I don't. You win. Go and enjoy yourself. Anyone?
Yeah, I think it's more or less orchestrated. Our son lives in Paris now. He wasn't in Paris for the weekend there, but he said it was always going to happen, was his only comment. And I do think you have this, for a better word, darker forces that takes these opportunities to basically stir up riots and stir up conflict and stir up social mess, because it's an opportunity for them to do so. How well planned and how well premeditated it is, I'm not sure. But largely speaking, when these things happen, there is always, for me, a reasonable element of planning and premeditation that goes into it. Okay. It's an opportunity to push your narrative further.
Okay. I'm always a bit confused by it. Okay, so in The Nerve, and I'll share the article in a moment, Timothy Snyder. Now, do you guys remember Timothy Snyder left the US? He's in Canada now because he's an authoritarian expert and recognized that he needed to leave the country. So the title is, "We are watching the US attempt a superpower suicide." I don't know if any of you have had a chance to read it, but that's been something that so many of the decisions that are being made, so much of what's going on, you're kind of looking at it and you're like, why would you choose this path? So, and what were your thoughts, Richard? You read it?
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting article, and people, if they have the opportunity, should read it, because it's
share it.
It's a really good piece of journalism. Now, I tend to be, a huge cynic, as David in particular knows very well, and I actually don't think this is done out of idiocy or anything like the sort. I think this is a premeditated plan of basically enriching yourself in the process, where America becomes a very distant second compared to what I can achieve on a personal level because of the position I've been put in. And then it actually makes a lot more sense.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Well,
do you want to go through it again?
The nerd rock, sort of that side of things, the nerd rock.
Tech bro. Yeah, exactly. It's like, it might not be great for America, but I really don't care very much about that, because in this particular world, the national states don't matter anymore, because
okay, so you go back to the X-Files with the guys in the room.
Yeah, kind of, but I just think a lot of the decision making that's taken place lately is all about personal enrichment for the people involved, and then it makes a lot more sense. When you have these greater superpowers through history, there's always a finite time they can remain a superpower, because the process of decline is more or less similar. And US share some of those stories, right? You get lazy in your position, and you get less on the edge to maintain it, because you constantly need to placate people who are expected to get more and more because you are the superpower of the world. It goes for the Roman Empire, all these empires. They eventually fade because they corrode from within, because that's how a cycle goes through. Yeah. So some of the things that would have happened to the US probably would have happened anyway, regardless. And it started, in my opinion, many administrations ago, that decline and the rise of China as the next superpower. That's certain inevitability to it. It's just numbers, and you can see what's happening. However, some of the self-inflicted wounds that are happening are much more in the context of, it might not be great for the US as a country, but actually, you know what? It's great for me and my buddies. And then it rationally makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Anyone else want to sort of comment on it, David? No? Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I was going to say, I think the interesting side is, of course, this is, you have Russia as a superpower committing superpower suicide.
Do you think Russia's a superpower?
In my book, no.
It certainly thought it was before it started the Ukraine war.
Yeah, okay. In your own mind, you can still be a superpower, and I'm sure there are still British people who think of the empire. But let's be honest, you're not. The only superpower that's existed for the last half a century is the US, really. And now you have a rising superpower that at some point in the not too distant future will become the new superpower of the world. And there's a huge element of inevitability about that.
Yeah.
For me, Russia in their world, they were probably thinking they were a superpower, but really they're not.
Yeah, but the only thing that sort of gives them that superpower status was the nuclear weapons, right?
Yeah.
But so the core thesis of the article is no state has ever deliberately and systematically destroyed its own power as fast as Trump's US is doing. And Snyder, the authoritarian expert, calls it strategic suicide. It's really worth listening to, because a lot of the decisions that are being made, you kind of like, what's going on? And what you're talking about with the tech bros, the what can I take for myself? So a couple of times I've been talking with people about this community, and they're like, but they're smart, right? And I think that's something that people aren't really appreciating, because if you actually look at the decisions, so Anthropic's basically just put out a call out for a slowdown on AI because of the risks, right? The long-term thinking, the consequences of their actions and their decisions, I actually don't think they are as smart as everyone thinks they are. They might be brilliant. They might, you know, and if you watch a tech developer at work, it's like they're like a composer. They're amazing, but human impact, that question, that's not necessarily a conversation that they have. It's what can technology do? It's not what will the impact on humanity be with this technology. Those two questions are not side by side. Anyone? No?
Yeah, I pick up on the smart part. I mean, you know, kind of, you know, what does it mean to be smart? Because they make money. I think, you know, that's what you can see or you can observe. You know, that's what the evidence is. The smart bit is an inference. It's kind of like a contextual inference that we've somehow put on top that actually doesn't need any evidence because it's a received wisdom. So, you know, it's a deference. People do that as a deference, not because there's any actual evidence of anything of the kind. And when you go and look at people who are, you know, kind of smart, as in, you know, they're academically smart, they're kind of culturally smart, and so on in those things, you know, they don't make money, and you kind of tend to ignore them and don't think of them as smart. So I think all that comment is just that, you know, we have this reference for people who make money. And this cultural suicide, what Richard is saying is, you know, that reference is now allowed reference for them, not reference, reference for people who make money. And that reference for them is allowing them to kill off a superpower.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think that's actually the real essence of the conclusion, that I have the ability to do this because it adds to my own bottom line. And you know what? Then in the grand scheme of things, the future of the US as that superpower is irrelevant.
Yeah. And then they could set up their network state, right? And so the things that he's talking about in this article were, one of the things is the energy misstep. It's just, you know, it's really crazy what's going on. You know, there's two countries in the world. One's focused on fossil fuels, the other's focused on sustainable energy. You see the growth that's coming out of China in this sector. It's incredible. Outdated military focus. So Trump's, you know, battleships, all that sort of stuff. The diplomatic collapse. I don't know how many of the embassies around the world don't have any ambassador in them. Losing to Iran, you know, just that whole decision. So, you know, I mean, basically, you know, whatever happens next, if the tech bros win and the individual wealth, if they win, and they can go and build their network states, they were trying to do one of them in the Philippines that got rejected just recently. Or the US is going to have to go through a massive revolution, and it's going to be very, very painful. But you know, that's the point that we're at. Moving on to another story, big cancer news this week. There's a new pancreatic cancer pill, and this was always one of the worst forms of cancer you could get. It was like, I don't know the fatality, but it was very like 99% or something, 95%. It was something like that. But there's a new drug, and it's stopping tumor growth. Joe, did you have a chance to have a look at that or talk to any of the academics in that field in the last week?
Well, I do spend some time on the scientific podcasts.
They're pretty excited about this because what it does is it creates a lot of extension in terms of life. So for pancreatic cancer, the numbers were so encouraging. And what they really like about this is that the markers are also translatable, as in like it's something that they're going to do more exploration about this, but it could very much influence other cancers as well. So that's all I got on that. It's very exciting. They're trying to fast track it. And the doctor who was speaking about reporting on the numbers was actually saying that his hope and the way it looked like it was going to go is that he was going to be able to take it back to his other patients for the mainstream use within this next few months. So that's really, really great.
Yeah, no, it's cool. They got a standing ovation, which was not expected. So the other story it's been brewing around for a while, but basically the EU is launching a major push to break with the US and China from a technology perspective. But then there's this other thing which is called Pax Silica. There's a guy called Arnaud Bertrand, who's a sort of an academic type person. I don't know how to classify him. And he was basically talking about this Pax Silica as Europe being submissive to America, and that this was a negative thing. And then Europe's announced that it's going to break with American and Chinese companies and build its own. But there's a lot of contradictions in the information out there. But the core message seems to be that Europe is going to take control of its tech, and get out of the US in particular, because you've got people being locked out of Microsoft, you're being locked out of databases. They can't book an Airbnb because it's an American-owned company. But at the same time, all of these great technology revolutions happen in Europe. They get bought up by American companies. So like the money's got to be there in Europe to get the technology revolution going. So I don't know who's on top of this story. Anyone?
Well, one of the biggest things that holds. Sorry, go ahead.
I think Europe is never going to be able to do that because it's got the EU running it.
Right.
It's just a totally stupid dream.
All right. So cloud sovereignty rules. That's always been there. Chips, they can't.
Just look at what Europe has done for data privacy and stuff. GDPR. Okay. What it's done is meant that everybody can now get whatever data they want, because you just end up clicking on all the things that says you agree or whatever it is. The European approach is that somehow we govern it. And when you do that and you still want it to work, you actually end up by giving away all the control that you could possibly have. The regulations are done by people who have absolutely no sense. I was speaking with a guy who was working with Timmerman after the European debt crisis and 2008, whatever. And they're setting up all these new rules about leverage and finance and stuff. And this was about 2-3 years ago. So this is kind of like a long time after the crisis went. And I said, you realize debt is now way over what it was before. And it was like, it can't be. It's impossible. We set up so it will never be that. That's the EU.
Yeah.
So you're trying to build a...
Right, okay. Joe, did you...
Well, I was going to say, from the opposite side of it also is about the regulations, right? The regulations have also stopped companies from saying, I want to develop in Europe because it's too expensive to go wrong, right? So I think the EU is to tech what California is to buildings. If you want to do something in the US, if you want to change something in your backyard in California, it's hell, right? And I think Europe poses that kind of thing as well. So when I look at companies, so far what I've seen, again, I'm not an analyst, but I've seen companies withdraw from the European market, and I think most times it's about the risk of going awry in terms of GDPR, that kind of stuff. It is the consequence of not following the rules, and it's too much in terms of a framework. I think in Europe it's very clear what you can't do, and that's not always a good thing.
That's like the message rules, right?
Yeah. Anyone else?
Because basically what it is everybody somehow now in a world that feels that they can't feel secure with being neighbor to someone else. So just think about what it means actually for the world to have 3 times the resources that you need in order to try and make a silicon chip. Europe is suffering drought all over the place. The amount of water you need to make a silicon chip is absolutely insane. The reason why it's all done over in Taiwan is because this is not some hillbilly going into the factory. These factories are the cleanest space on Earth. They're cleaner than space itself, and outer space. So you go there and you have people pissing around in there. And and then you have all the things around that says, "Oh, it's my right to do this," or whatever it is, as I'm trying along here and whatever, in that way. And I think you're going to find that actually, it's just going to end up. It's first of all, I can't see how Europe under the EU is going to be able to do that. Look at the European Space Agency. Where's it got? When was the last time anything went up in space out of that? And just look at the European jet fighters. What happened to them? And this whole thing is just kind of a completely ridiculous. I mean, going south, having an unelected president, absolutely. The whole thing has no representation. It's not to say I'm against Europe. I love Europe. I hated Brexit. I like to be in Europe, be part of the EU. But let's be honest about what we can actually do.
Yeah. All right. So cynicism on Europe's ability to deliver on this promise. Okay, I get the message. The UN came out this week with a big warning on a super El Nino on the way. There's a lot of coverage coming out of it. In a publication called Severe Weather Europe, they're saying that the first impacts of El Nino have already been detected. So a lot of the early coverage was saying it was sort of September timeframe when it would hit, but they're saying it's already happening, and it's things like the warming of the oceans. So one of the what's his name? I put it in the show notes. Professor Berardelli said it's going to be a supercalifragilistic something El Nino, not even a Godzilla. It's going to be something much bigger than last time. But
don't you hate it when nerds try to be funny?
Yeah, I think it's good. We need humor, but it's warm Pacific Ocean anomaly. So that's one. Westerly wind bursts, weaker trade winds, the strong Kelvin wave. So that's that big red thing, heat space that's under the ocean that keeps showing up in the graphs. So there's a lot of fear starting to build up around this. I think it's one of the things that we need to get prepared for. I can't even imagine how much hotter it's going to get out in this part of the world. So yeah, anything you guys have been noticing on the El Nino coverage?
It's starting to get noticed. For me, that would be the big news. If we rewind a month, no one except people very, very in tune with environmental news were talking about it. It's now on the way to transition into mainstream media.
Okay, yeah.
I think people don't know what it means. I think it's reported, but it's not like Trump is going to visit and everybody now has a vision what that means for them in their way, positive or negative, whichever. But saying El Nino is going to come along is like sort of saying I don't know. Yeah, exactly. In that way, people don't know what it means. I don't know what it means. Kind of like, weather's going to be terrible, but what does that actually mean? I don't know what it means.
I suppose we probably know what it means more out in this part of the world because because we know it, right? So growing up in Australia, El Nino, La Nina, they were very different things. Floods, cooler, heat, hotter, fires. So it was very, very clear. One of my frustrations with all the media coverage is every single piece of coverage goes through about half the article is explaining what it is. I'm like, I don't need to know what it is. Just tell me what this news story is. So yeah, I suppose in different parts of the world, and Europe is going to be technically the least impacted by it, but at the same time, not really.
Well, it's not. I mean, this is the whole point. This is what I mean. You're not knowing what it means. Our food don't come from Europe.
Sorry, what's that?
It doesn't come from Europe. It comes from Chile. It comes from Australia. It comes from all these places which are impacted. So this is what I mean by people don't know what it means because they talk about all the reports talk about some weather pattern what it means is not the weather pattern. What it means is what happens to the supermarket that I go to. What happens is the fuel I need to put in my thing, or the Amazon delivery I'm expecting, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by people don't know what it means, because people talk about it, insist on talking about some dipole oscillation in the kind of southern Pacific.
Yeah. Going South is talking about how it's the biggest since 1875. So we spoke about this probably a month, 6 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
One of the things that isn't being discussed about that 1875 event, so 10% of the world's population died at that time because of it. But one of the things that isn't discussed is at that time, so the British took the food from India back to the UK, and a huge number of people in India died from starvation because of that. So going into this Super El Nino, countries like India will keep their food and make sure that their people are okay, which we've talked about before. They've done in past years when rice production was low. But like David was saying, so there's going to be food shortages, definitely, famine, drought, food inflation, supply chain disruption. There's going to be technology that doesn't work because there's no rain. So every country knows what. Most people from a country know what happens during an El Nino based on where they are. Most people do. So in Australia, we could be seeing one of the worst fire seasons they've ever seen again. The coral bleaching, there was an article I read this morning. The coral reefs in the northern hemisphere could bleach. No, it's not could. They will bleach. It's going to be heat like we've never seen before. Some of the charts that you're seeing of the heat extremes. So I mean, and the impacts are going to be enormous. So I agree with you. All right, we've promised to talk about this before, and we haven't talked about it. And it's called 60 Section 301 Investigations. And I'm going to hand it to Richard and David to talk about this.
Oh, thank goodness.
The investigations are in, and Singapore's been put on the list as one of the countries that has not fulfilled its obligations. There's Canada, Ecuador, the European Union, Indonesia, Mexico, and Pakistan are also on the list. So basically 60 countries. And to me, it's just a legal way of Trump being able to do his tariffs. So, because I'm sure they don't fulfill those obligations either. All right, who wants to go, David?
I think you've said it.
Yeah,
right.
You summed it really nicely.
Okay.
If there ever was a BS story.
Can we do the El Nino thing and let me know what it is?
With the 60 Section 301 investigations?
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard, come on.
No, I think it's just a drummed up fig leaf for being able to push ahead whatever you've already decided. I mean, the determinants of the list are basically, it's a joke. Because you have no ability to actually delve down and find the real truth, if there is such a thing as a real truth. It's just let me compile a list to justify what I'm going to do anyway.
Yeah. But what it does is it allows the US to take action over trade and over over currency and so on. It allows them to then go on and actually kind of it's not a sanctioning of a country in the sense it's impose fines. In different forms on a country. So US always holds that as kind of like a weapon of last resort in a sense, because it then allows them a lot of room in terms of how they can impose financial punishment.
Okay. Yeah. Can I just pretend I don't know what's going on?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you. So they've done this. They put out a notification. It was quite some time ago, saying that they were going to do this assessment. So basically, they've come up with the response. So if you have an economy with some forced labor prohibition framework, so there's forced labor, so child workers or some sort of human suffering in it, you will be charged 10% duty and 12.5% duty for all the others that are lacking effective processes. So basically they went out and they sent out a notification to all these countries, we're going to be doing this. Then they've come back just in the last week and said 60 countries have got this labor. They're breaking the labor rules around the world, and because of that, it means that they can compete with America and produce lower value items because they're not taking care of the people who are producing the product. So, very bad way of explaining it, but you kind of get the point. Yeah,
right.
And,
basically saying, unlike the coal mines in America.
Yeah, and because there's none of that. America's not doing any of that anywhere in the world. So
yeah, safest country in the world.
Yeah, so basically, foreign producers use forced labor to keep costs artificially low, undercutting US producers who comply with labor standards. So that's kind of where it comes from. But the results just came out in the last week, and now all of the countries who've been put on the list have got an opportunity to respond. And a lot of the countries are saying, well, this is just completely unfair. So, but to me, it just seems like a legal way to get tariffs.
Yeah, because the tariffs have been overturned by the Supreme Court. Yeah. The sort of crazy tariffs have been overturned by the Supreme Court. Trump's supposed to give money back, or the U.S. government's supposed to give money back to the I don't know, whoever who have paid.
The companies that got the tariffs levied on them effectively have sued in some cases, right?
And so the big trouble right now is that if they're being pushed now to give refunds to those who didn't sue as well. So that's the big bill that's coming their way,
which is going to cost the US quite a bit. And Trump believes that America can't be the world's consumer. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the idea that, you can't have one country consuming everything other countries producing in the world in that way. But Section 301, I don't know when it was first signed into law, 1970s, I think. So it's quite old. Essentially allows the US to decide if another country is trading on unfair terms with it. And if it deems that it is trading on unfair terms with it, then it allows the US to take action by the way of imposing tariffs, restricting imports, and tearing up trade agreements or whatever it is that it wants to do.
Yeah. All right. So we're all clear as mustard on that one.
Indeed.
Excellent. All right. So if you're paying attention to the news, you'll be noticing that there's a lot of news around what's going on in Somalia. So one of the pieces in Global Voices is titled "Somalia Drought, Fuel Prices and Conflicts Heighten Famine Risk." So repeated failed rains. This is a population that is really, really suffering. Conflict and insecurity is obviously on the rise. The energy shock it's put the price of fuel up 150%, and you've got to remember a lot of the people there are incredibly poor. And then, of course, the funding, like USAID, has collapsed. It was that they only got 20% of external funding, so it's 288 million versus 1.42 billion. So I always say to people, if you feel like you're having a bad day, you're lucky you're not in Somalia. But to me, like some of the articles that I'm seeing, it's on the road of a completely collapsed state, and
and I think the other side of this is that Somalia is on the coast of Africa, just kind of below sort of Saudi Arabia and coming out of the Gulf of Hormuz, that sort of thing. So a lot of the ships, if they're going to try and go past it in that way, so the piracy is increasing. Because if your fuel's gone up in price and it's nothing else, you're going to use it in the way that makes the most money, and the way that makes the most money is go and hijack another ship. So we're going to find that piracy is increasing, and that's going to end up affecting everybody around. So, Somalia is not something that just happens out there, because a lot of big ships end up getting hijacked. Massive container ships can get hijacked as well. You just have a little ones coming along. So it goes down to, it has kind of implications. And a few years back, almost a decade back, I think now, I think the UK and other navies have their navies patrolling that sort of part of Africa as an attempt to try and deal with that.
But that was when UK had a navy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The UAE's in there too, right? The UAE's in there as well, getting up to no good.
As in the piracy, or as in just
no, in the country.
Oh yeah.
That's sort of a little bit behind closed doors. That one. There's a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so Russia war losses. They're starting to sort of report the numbers. I can't remember when it was. It was earlier this year when we were talking about how the Ukrainians basically have announced that they're just going to have to go out and kill a lot of Russians, and because it's the only way that they can see that they're going to win the war. A lot of the headlines are sort of talking about that Ukraine's definitely got the upper hand. Zelensky basically said Russian casualties increased to 145,000 this year, 86,000 killed, not 59,000 seriously wounded. They're not able to replace the amount of troops. But the interesting thing is, in 3 of the sort of the mainstream Russian media, the conversation is shifting, where it's basically the message is it's time to get out. It's in the 5th year. Russia's not winning this war. They're not gaining new territory. Ukraine's developing new skills and they're selling those skills now. But I don't know. When will this be over? I
think your last. Yeah.
Yeah,
Richard?
no, go on.
Go, Richard.
I think you are very, very rapidly approaching a massive inflection point here.
Yeah.
Where things will go in 1 or 2 or 3 directions. It's abundantly clear that Putin and his sort of lackeys can no longer protect ordinary Russian citizens from the reality of this war. The Ukrainians are able to militarily penetrate much, much further into Russia than was the case before. They're imposing massive strikes on Russian infrastructure, and in some cases they have the potential to hit other targets, but so far seem to have not done so, but they have the ability, which is important. And Russia has no longer got the ability to recruit people that will leave the citizens of Moscow and St. Petersburg in particular unaffected of what's going on. You've emptied the prisons, you've depleted the countryside of recruits, you're importing mercenaries from all over the world. And it has the further military implication, no doubt, that the quality of Russian troops at the front line is shrinking all the time, and hence the casualty rates are going up. These are not experienced combat soldiers that probably the first wave involved a much larger number of. And Ukraine has found out that when you are a very, very large country with vast territory, and your explicit strategy has become to kill as many as possible, you can always trade terrain for casualties. And that's very effective in Ukraine's case. So for me, you are very, very, very close to this kind of Minsky moment where Russia will either decide to go all in, we will probably include new weapons and start hitting civilian targets, or they will find some kind of fig leaf for getting out of this absolute shit show.
Yeah. And what Russia is capable of doing to finish this is, that's what's got everyone so alarmed, right? We don't know what it's capable of doing. David?
Well, I mean, Russia, Afghanistan, Georgia, Chechnya, kind of the list of countries where it got into long, drawn-out conflicts that eventually sort of backed off and went home. So this is not necessarily different in that way. Why it keeps doing that, I'm not sure. I can't understand it in particular, but that tends to go on. But what has happened out of the war in Iran is actually that, the sort of drone technology, cheap drone technology, has really become a great commodity, really become interesting. And that's where the Ukrainians have been, kind of really have been finding, there is a market for what they do in that way. A drone that you can imagine building a military drone over that comes from initial concept to implementation. That took, maybe half a year kind of thing, right? That's the sort of technology that you have. That ends up being extremely effective in dealing with these things. It's like the time when people were talking about how, you know, we got these amazing space weapons and you know, lasers that come out and stuff, and then these image of someone else going around with a spray can just kind of, you know, covering up where the laser comes out of, type thing. So where this goes to, I don't think it's going to go there, but you know, I'm usually I don't know what it is, but if Russia wants to push this on, I suspect it probably rather just back off. It does go into the next step, which is kind of the tactical nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing to do. It is also the thing for the US to do with Iran in that sense. You know, what Iran has done is drawn the US into effectively a guerrilla war that it never wanted.
Yeah.
And it is going to have a decisive closing, not a win, just a decisive closing that it can claim to whatever it is. It is it's the crescendo in a set of fireworks, something that can do that. Yeah. And so either way finishes it. Oh, I'm not sure you can talk of who wins or whatever it is, but it opens the door to kind of much worse conflicts. That's the next step of what we have. It's all a part of a sign of a time. It's not particularly hopeful or helpful. It does kind of go into whether you go back to the previous story of the superpower committing suicide, or whether there's a group of people who are actually. I don't think there's a group of people decisively planning this is what we want. I think there's a group of people going back to the SMART. I don't think they plan. I don't think they do that.
Yeah.
I think there's a group of people who are very happy to then go along, and as a gap opens up, typically, something happens, everybody goes, oh my God, what's going on? And then it kind of closes, gives you a chance to close as a reaction. What happens here is the gap closes up. They go, oh yeah, I can go in there. And they're very fast at getting in there. And so it can't close and just wedges it open wider and wider. And they can do that because they have a lot of money. They have a lot of kind of that connection from the money and all the rest of it. So, it's not a great path in that sense. It requires Russia, Putin to, at this point, to go along as it would in the sense of Trump, to sort of says, actually, you know what, I've got my election to fight. I'm not going to win it this way. Maybe that's not our mind. I don't know. We'll see. But if it is to close, if it's bringing it to a close, it is going. I see more chance of it being kind of like a great big massive blow up of something, or rather, then let's just pack up our bags and go home.
Exactly. There's no ego in that way. Okay, let's move on to some more ridiculous politicians. So Australia's going through a bit of an interesting phase where Pauline Hanson, who what's her party? Anyway, she's this person.
Is it still One Nation, or is it something else?
Yeah. She's just so ridiculous to me. So the Batuta advocate, who I've just shared an article, sort of talked about the top 7 things that she's going to be able to achieve, and one of them is negotiating deals with our major Asia trade partners. So she's a complete racist. She's been racist since she started. She's the one that wore the full burqa into Parliament. She's ridiculous. Gina Reinhardt is obviously propping her up, because you got to go, if you're going to go far right, you got to go with Gina. I just the idea that that there's even a possibility, and where I grew up is the first place that this party won a seat just a few weeks ago, and I was like, oh, for God's sake. Anyway, we are at a stage in the world where we need the adults to step up and lead the countries of our nation. And everywhere I look, Nigel Farage in the UK, Pauline Hanson in Australia, everywhere I look, I don't know how people can't see it. Like, talking about the Asian negotiation, right? So when Tony Abbott, who's now the new the leader of the Liberal Party again, right? He pissed off China so much that they said, all right, we're not doing any business with you. So Chinese business to Australia is worth 45%. American business to Australia is worth like 10%. So it's never in Australia's interest to piss China off. because the market's just too big. So now you've got Pauline Hanson coming in, and all she does is piss off anyone who's not white Australian. Yeah, it's not going to be good for the country. So like,
yeah, well, I mean, she's also so the one thing that came out of about the Asia connection and China connection in that sense, the one thing that Trump's visit to China made clear from the China side was lay off Taiwan. Just allow it to be whatever it is. Don't disrupt it. Don't do anything. Just you don't need to do anything. We've had 1940s, right? So 8 decades of accepting the status quo as it is, basically. And look at how Taiwan is. Look at where we are, kind of thing. Well, let's just have another 8 decades, and then we'll see how we all come back together in that way. Who knows? The whole world may be one country by then. And so that's very clear. But Pauline Hanson is actually very much pro Taiwan independence, and she wants to have great trade with China. So that's going to be a bit of a
and she can't control her mouth, right?
And she can't control her mouth. So,
yeah. And she never shows up. Yeah. Does it worry you guys that there's so many idiots out there?
I think what it is I think it's not time. I think we've gone past the time of kind of the adults in the room kind of thing. I think it's the time to recognize that the people, we are an adult. We are the adults. We are the people together in that way. The Ukraine, we're just talking about the Ukraine. The Ukraine is not because of Zelensky, it's because of the Ukrainian people. And that's what it is. And across countries, across the world, there are people who feel very much wanting to be in that kind of solidarity, in that kind of communion with each other, as it were, without it having to be formal, without having to have all these kind of other things about it, just in the sense that, look, we all face this shit together. And, let's just stop trying to turn it into something else. But she's elected. This is, which is great.
She hasn't got a seat that will give her, allow her the path to prime ministership, but she's now talking about going for one of those seats. So
yeah, she's going to be. But I think the comment, going south earlier was, Ursula von der Leyen's not elected at all.
Mm-hmm. No. Give me Ursula over Pauline any day. All right. I'm going to quickly rip through some of the environmental stuff. So the Trump administration has announced that it's going to dismantle the ocean monitoring system. So if you've ever watched Day After Tomorrow, and all those buoys out in the ocean start sending their alarm, so that's what they're dismantling, which is a really good idea, because it's really good not to know what's happening in the ocean right now. That's it. Everyone's going to win here.
I think
hashtag sarcasm. Hashtag sarcasm.
They're taking the scientific method, to be exactly what it is. You need observations for things to be real. So if you don't observe it, it can't be real.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing's going to happen, right? So it's no problem. I'm presuming that the pilgrimage to Mecca is over. Because I think it was last weekend, was that right, Joe? When they had the final celebrations. So I didn't hear about the mass deaths that we heard the year before. I think it was 1,300 people died the year before. It's Eid. The time that this happens will be moving backwards towards January. So it's not expected it's expected. Basically, the temperature that they've got now will also move backwards, so they don't think it's going to get worse. So if you've ever been in an airport where there's families getting ready to get on the plane to go and visit Mecca, because every Muslim should do it once in their lifetime, it's a pretty special thing to witness. It's very powerful. But the big thing that's obviously been getting a lot of attention is the heat waves. And last Saturday I spoke to my mum, and she's like, "Oh, how are those heat waves in Europe? I'm looking at your clothes. It's not that hot in the UK at the moment, right? The heat wave is over." Yeah.
Heat wave is most definitely over.
Right. So it's been going on for months in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh.
Is the the variability of the weather has been much more severe.
Yeah.
So the past few weeks, the past few days have had incredible kind of cloudbursts, hail, very strong wind, and that comes off the very kind of heat before. So complete variability.
Yeah. And it's actually really dangerous for you guys when you go from cold to hot. And the summer predictions are looking pretty hot. But an estimate came out from India, which I put in the weekend reads last week, where they've done an excess deaths during a heat wave per day. They believe 3,400 per day, and if the heat wave goes for 5 days, it's 30,000 deaths. In the mainstream media, they've said there's officially 37 deaths in India and 10 in Pakistan, and I haven't seen that number updated in the past week. But they actually, and this has been going since April. It's early. Pakistan, a place in Pakistan called Dadu, it reached 51.5 degrees Celsius. One of the big risks in Pakistan is obviously a glacial lake outburst or a GLOF. We're just waiting for another one of them to happen. So yeah, the heat's been really, really, really like scarily intense. It's very, very uncomfortable in Asia. Like even when you go out for a walk at night, it just doesn't cool down. But of course, it's not just about humans. Animals. There was an article saying that the koalas in Australia are at risk. Insects, which obviously impacts pollinators, which impacts food. Soil that dries out faster, which makes it harder to grow food, and the topsoil gets washed away. The river heat is increasing, which is killing the life in the rivers as well as algal blooms. The forests reduce growth. So there's a lot of impacts where we talk a lot about the human impact. We don't talk a lot about the human impact outside of the Western Hemisphere. There's a lot of people dying. We don't know. But there's a lot of other life that is dying, which is also going to impact us no matter where we are in the world. So that's another one. Thoughts?
More of the same. I think they getting better.
I think the animal part is really kind of important along, tiny insects and not just the bigger animals, but the tiny microbes and stuff, because we count the deaths of the excess deaths of the humans, and we're beginning to do that in that way, but nobody's counting the excess deaths of the basic kind of living matter that supports the higher organisms.
Yeah.
In this, go back to school, your biology has this pyramid, and you've got all this masses of stuff at the bottom, and you kind of go on top, and the top of it is some elephant, I think, typically, or maybe a lion or something. But without all of that mass along, then the top part just sort of crumbles down in that way. And that's kind of, I'm glad you're bringing this up about it's not all just humans, because the humans don't actually survive without all that stuff in there. Or we're going to find ourselves severely tested in how we kind of be nice to each other when that happens. So yeah, definitely something to think about, or something to not just think about, something to kind of take a step towards dealing with, accepting, and then going forward.
I want to get us to do a couple of AI bits with Joe before we finish, but there's an Arctic tipping point that's been passed. There's a Tibetan tipping point that's been passed. So it's all good news on the climate front.
Yay!
It's been super smart. We're doing everything we need to be doing.
And it's okay. We're measuring it less, so it'll be fine.
As long as we don't measure, it's not happening. All right, Joe, there's a guy called Rob Williams. It looks like a Jeff Bezos story. It's not. Who's trying to work out the brain's core algorithm to make AI more efficient and use less energy, which is kind of interesting. And he seems like a pretty interesting dude. But that might not be the story you want to talk about from an AI perspective. So what's got your attention?
I can speak a little bit about that because, this is a story that's getting attention right now. It's not a new thing. We've been trying to imitate the brain for the longest time. And what has been fundamentally wrong about the approach is most people have said this: the brain is like a computer. And that is actually fundamentally wrong. It's not the way the world works, not the way the brain works at all. And so when people try to solve things in that same way as they used a computer, it doesn't work when you're trying to solve what the brain is doing. So what they're doing now is they're trying, and what they've been doing for a long time, is to try and figure out what intelligence is like, or what thinking and computing is like, the way a brain works. And the project that we're hearing about is this $500 million project where they're trying to understand this thing and get some insight to it so they can use it and probably commercialize it and all that kind of stuff. So it is an alternate route to AI, SGI, super intelligence, because if you can solve that, if you can kind of create that, you can run a human brain, if you like. The thing about
you could
something
just
like
have humans.
I beg your pardon?
If you had the human brain artificially, you could just have humans.
Yes, you could have humans. Yes, right. But what they're trying to do, of course, is to take out little irritating things like fatigue, need for sleep, and all those other irritating aspects of us. Now, the problem that I have with this is that when you cross the first boundary, and let's say you manage to make something similar, and you have this basic human brain, what you do have is a basic human brain. And it's I think it might be a fallacy to think that every human brain is the same as every other human brain. So if you come up with something like this and you work out something, it doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily create the rest of the stuff that you might imagine. If for instance what happens is we figure out exactly how to duplicate a human brain in terms of activity, then we're going to duplicate everything else that comes along with it as well, which means that then we are really playing with fire, because we get irrationality as well, right? So
yeah, I was going to say,
that's what
do you duplicate a teenage brain? Can you
exactly.
Does it just stay forever as a teenage brain?
Yeah, if we create successfully this artificial brain in all its form, it means it's also going to have the artificial forms of hormones and emotions. And to me, if you think AI as we know it is dangerous, I don't want to have super AI with emotions. I don't want super AI with strong feelings about things. I don't want super AI. I don't want super AI to get to the day when it goes, that thing I did last week, not the best idea.
Yeah, exactly. And there's I'll put us all up. There's some pretty strong feelings about it, like we said earlier. Anthropic sort of asking for a global sort of pullback on further developing AI. It looks like it's about to get out of human control. It's like, oh, for God's sake. There was another piece on Mythos being used by the Department of Defense for cyber.
Wasn't that an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? Or was it back in the day about Skynet or something?
Skynet. So I always thought Skynet was like, oh wow, cloud computing is Skynet. But now, of course, we're in a different time. That was Terminator. Yeah, saving energy by not doing what they are told. Well, they use lots of energy. Yeah. So look, there's a lot of other things that we wanted to talk about. There's all sorts of shenanigans going on, obviously, with Trump. SpaceX is going through its first IPO. I'd love to have talked about that. Obviously, Iran, Hezbollah has said that no, we're not going to stop fighting. We've got a police crisis in the UK, and there's a lot of other things that are going on. But we just there's too much to talk about. But you can follow my weekend reads where I keep everyone up to date on the latest stories. But what's keeping you guys distracted?
More old movies for me, I'm afraid. Having done the Clint Eastwood trilogy, we've moved on to more 60s and 70s movies. So we obviously needed to do the Dirty Harry trilogy as well.
Yeah, you did it.
Yeah, it was just had to be. But there's a few more lined up here.
Yeah. Anything you enjoyed?
Pretty much all of it, which makes me probably very sad. But I think they've stood the test of time really well. One of them were watched with our daughter, who is 28 now, I think. And although she's become more of a woman of the world and somewhat less woke, I think, than she was in her earlier years, she was still quite shocked by the whole languaging sequence that was being used in Dirty Harry, how to describe things. And when you think of it, yeah, of course it is. We have moved on since the 70s. But I dread to think what she would have thought, 10 years ago with that kind of language.
You should watch Blazing Saddles with her.
Yeah.
I'm really tempted to watch that with my boys. I think they're ready for it.
Yeah.
All right, David, you're on mute.
So I've been watching. I think this goes back a little bit to Cindy's comments a bit earlier in that sense. So I've been watching this thing called Mindful Murder. And yes, Joe might know it. Me laughs in that way. So, anyways, this lawyer who's really stressed about his life, and he gets to engage with mindfulness. And as he engages with mindfulness, he's more purposeful and more kind of at them in the moment, and he's more able to single task rather than be toying in multitask and all those things. And he's reaching his kind of work-life balance and so on. And along the way, he manages to kill a crime boss, ends up having to run 2 different crime syndicates, and is wanted by the police. And it's kind of like all these other things going on along as well. So, and all of that is the consequence of being very mindful. And as it says in kind of the tagline, it's, I didn't kill anyone until I was 42. And, that's a little late. But in that week, he killed about half a dozen others.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. I reckon Joe would like that sort of thing. Joe, what do you?
I love concepts like that, but sometimes I don't quite get into it. Like there's a series that I enjoyed in the first few seasons of it. It's not that it became bad or anything else, but I've just not been connecting with it. I'm reminded that I should. The series is Barry. I don't know if you remember that. It's basically a hitman who decides that he wants to try something a little bit different. So he gets into acting and improv classes, and his world from his past collides with his present. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens out of that. But what I've been really enjoying actually is watching, and too much of it, the crowd work by a certain magician comedian. And I think you'll enjoy the character as well. Her name is Lucy Darling, or at least the character is called Lucy Darling. So just go search Lucy Darling on YouTube, and you're going to have hours and hours of fun with this really fantastic character that does stuff from the stage. So I think an Australian reference that might give you a bit of a sense of who that person might be. Dame Humphreys, you remember Dame Humphreys? Yep. So imagine that. So it's a character. It is somebody who shows up in a certain way, and she does magic, and she is just delightful. She's one of those people that in the character creates those lovely comedic moments, and yet at the same time you can also hear the wisdom that comes because that character is wrapped around the actor. So it's a very interesting story where it's actually a very young person acting as a slightly older person, and through that channeling, she's able to create both the confident persona, the witty remarks, as well as the wisdom of the older person.
Okay. Now, last week I promised I was going to watch Erin Brockovich and Hidden Figures, and I did. And in some ways, it's kind of like it's not a brain break because it's still happening. Erin Brockovich is doing amazing work on the data center front. But watching Hidden Figures was interesting because I watched it with Steve, and he saw it for the first time. And when it first came out, because Erin Brockovich is 20 years old, I think Hidden Figures maybe 10, a little bit more.
Less,
yeah.
Less than 20,
Everyone I know in the tech industry went and saw it. There was great excitement about watching the movie. But if it's been a while since you've watched it, I recommend watching it again because it's, one of the chapters I wrote in my book was about like when we hold people back for a reason, whether it's because it's a female or because they've got a sexual preference that isn't acceptable in society or whatever. But when we don't allow people to become all they're capable of being, everybody misses out. And when you watch it, I mean, this child genius is the person behind the reason America landed on the moon, and we're going back to that again. We're excluding people. We're not giving people. You hear the stories about what's going on in Afghanistan. What's happening to women in Afghanistan. Like when you hold women back, you hold everyone back. It's proved. It's in the data. It's in the economy. It's in every figure. So if it's been a while since you watched Hidden Figures, I think it might be a good time, because I'm looking at the anti-Muslim rhetoric that's rising around the world. Just racism in general. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve any of us. And they're the loudest voices, and we have to drown them out. So Hidden Figures wasn't the break I was hoping it was, but it was a good reminder.
Well, it'll be a long time, I think, before you see that movie where they talk about the great Muslims behind mathematics and progress of science in general.
I know, right? That's where it all did come from, right?
Sorry, I'm laughing because that's where our numbers come from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
That's where our numbers come from. So it's kind of that's why I'm laughing.
I know it's so stupid, right? We're so stupid. Anyway, there we go. Another week.
On that cherry note.
Yeah, I was saying that's where we're going to end this. We're so stupid.
Well, we are. We are so stupid.
Oh gosh, think about AI brain.
Yeah. But Cindy might recommend be stupid and know it.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you know it, it's all right.
It's all right.
That's another BS, by the way. Be stupid. There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, I like to be stupid. I enjoy it. All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Indeed.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Have a good weekend.